say that in the third part.
Now, yeah, we're having a debate on feminism now, and Yasmin's just said how handsome the doctor was, but he's gone now. You can't say that's why everybody was laughing. So let's have that debate about feminism. The actresses Meryl Streep and Carey Mulligan were in London this week. They were discussing women's rights, something we're going to be talking about shortly. They were here to promote the film Suffragette, 100 years after Emily and Pankhurst and an extraordinary group of women smashed windows and encouraged civil disobedience to win them the vote. Well, Brendan Gleeson plays a police inspector threatening to punish the protesters. It's another great role for a man who left teaching to pursue a dream of acting, and since then he's starred in films like Harry Potter, Braveheart and Gangs of New York. Vicky Beeching went to meet Brendan. First, here's a little taster from the film Suffragette.
Never surrender. Never give up the fight.
The movie Suffragette has been hotly anticipated. Tell us about your character and his role in the film.
Arthur Steed. He's a detective who's charged with infiltrating and stopping the movement of the suffragette movement, particularly with regard to the more violent it gets.
Don't bother arresting them. Let their husbands deal with them. Drop them at their front doors.
Within the journey, I think he's very highly protective of the Maud character, you know, and feels that she's been manipulated by the powers that be and that the people at the bottom always pay the price. But her insistence that the law of itself should not be upheld if the law is not worthy of being upheld, I think finally makes sense to him.
We're in every home. We're half the human race. You can't stop us all.
You might lose your life before this is over.
We will win.
And what do you hope is the main message people take away when they watch the film?
That you need to listen to people before they start smashing up the place. That's what I'd like to kind of, you know, I don't think it's confined to the suffragettes in 1912. You know, it seems to be a consistent thing that people wait until violence appears before doing anything to redress obvious injustice, and it's continuing. And I would hope also that because just given the fact that a man is allowed a proper depth of character in this, that it won't feel alienating towards men. I would like the male population to come and be part of the discussion. I think it's really important that it's not a women versus men thing. You know, it's combating fear and ignorance, and there's a lot to do, and people have to figure a lot of stuff out. So hopefully people will come and just have a proper chat afterwards and do something about it.
At the premiere, there was actually a demonstration on the red carpet, wasn't there, from feminists who would regard themselves perhaps as the suffragettes of today.
Yeah.
What did you think about that?
Well, again, you know, do we really have to be throwing ourselves on red carpets before people listen about that stuff? I think there have been cuts to that in that particular area proposed, aren't there? That's great, because like domestic violence is obviously solved. You know, we can start cutting back on the budget now to help people who are getting beaten up at home. It's just good for them, but you know, I wish people would do something about this stuff before everything you have to go and disrupt.
A film that's still fresh in many people's minds is the 2014 movie Calvary. He played a good priest in a church that was badly damaged by clerical sex abuse scandals. What was it like to play that role?
Heavy. It was hard. The first thing I said is I'm not telling anybody whether I believe in God or whether I'm Catholic, whether I'm, you know, I grew up a Catholic, obviously. I thought it will colour how people look at the performance. So I did feel a kind of responsibility for both sides, and it ended up being, for me, about the nature of goodness. But the oddest thing was putting on the vestments and, you know, putting on the whole things for Mass. I kind of felt, right, you are now the custodian of everything that you find decent. Priests of all different types would come up and say, that's it, that's my life. Fascinating. It really was. It was interesting. Yeah, there are a lot of good men in there, I think, still, despite all. So when the abuse happens, it's a crime against everybody.
What do you think about the Church in Ireland and beyond? How can the Catholic Church recover from those real-life clerical abuse scandals and regain people's trust?
Tell the truth. You know, open the books. You know, the idea that you can protect the body of the church because it's more important than the people in it is bogus. Once you lose trust, it's over.
You said that your own upbringing was rooted in Catholicism. What was that like?
It was beautiful for a while. And then it became compromised in your teens, where you ask the questions, yeah, but what about the babies in Africa, and how does that work out? And it becomes compromised. But for a while it was the notion of living, you know, in a kind of a love nest of security and knowing that you're in God's hands is, you know, it's a tough one to do without if you have to do it. And replacing it with some notion of personal fulfillment doesn't really cut the mustard very much.
Another major role you've had was in Harry Potter. You played Professor Alistair Mad-Eye Moody. And I'm wondering whether standing at the front of the classroom felt quite natural to you in that film, because you actually were a teacher before you went into acting.
I was, yeah. It was absolutely hilarious because I could bring even some of my own primary school teachers to mind as well. So I started pegging dusters and bits of chalk and stuff at the kids. And only one of the kids really got it, and it was Seamus, the Irish fella down the back. He kind of knew what I was at. But all these kids who had been kind of brought up with lots of positive reinforcement were kind of looking at me as if it was like from a different planet. So I had such a laugh, honestly. I had such a laugh with that, roaring and shouting and kind of just being a complete lunatic.
You need to know what you're up against. You need to be prepared. You need to find another place to put your chewing gum besides the underside of your desk, Mr. Finnegan.
Oh, no way. The old codger can see at the back of his head.
I'm here across classrooms.
And what do you think about the film industry itself? Do you think there's still some ways to go in reaching gender equality there?
Totally, but I mean, you know, in terms of quotas for women or any minorities or people who've been excluded, I think it's no harm to have a kickstart and say, well, okay, maybe 30% of whatever you just have to be, you know, women for now, for a 5-year period, 10-year period or so, or whatever it is. But I wouldn't have a 50-50 thing. You can't have incompetence. You don't hire fools because of their gender or because of anything else. And so you have to be ruthless up to a point, but certainly a kickstart would be no harm. And maybe it needs quotas to do that for a while.
Meryl Streep said in an interview this week that women's rights are men's issues.
Yeah,
do you resonate with that?
I absolutely agree with that. And you know, from the very beginning of the women's movement in the 70s, say, when I became aware of it, there were things, obviously, I would have had to address in my own attitudes and things like that. But I always found it alienating to have a kind of an anti-man tenor in what was going on. I don't think it's helpful at all. I think both, you know, it's about human progress really, and how we can refine the way we operate and how the next generation is going to benefit from it. And it's important that we try and figure this stuff out together.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a complete pleasure.
Thank you.
Isn't he lovely? Brendan Gleeson talking to Vicky